Hi, my name is Kunal, and welcome to the Geeks of the Valley podcast, which connects with some of the brightest minds globally who are leading their respective industries today to discuss the hottest upcoming industry trends and how their work is affecting the global economy. This morning, from the Montreal, Canada area, we have the founder and managing partner of Execution Labs joining us. Execution Labs is a hands on early stage investor and one of the most successful gaming incubators today. Please welcome Jason Della Rocca. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Kunal.
And how are things with you in light of COVID?
Oh, not as much travel. The game industry is a global business, and prior to the pandemic, I was in a different country almost every other week. So, happy to relax a bit, spend more time with the family, and get work done over Zoom, I guess.
I'm happy to hear that. Let's jump into the first question here, shall we?
Sure, sure.
So, Jason, tell me about yourself and your background and how it led you to being a top entrepreneur in the gaming industry and starting Execution Labs.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll kind of give you the short version because I've been in the game industry for over 25 years. In the early days, I was more on the hardware and 3D graphics, so the chips side of things, technology side of things. And it's interesting because just earlier this week was the 20-year anniversary of the release of the initial or the first Xbox from Microsoft, and I played a small part in that adventure. So that was kind of part of my early career. But that led to a role as the global director of the International Game Developers Association, which is the sort of the professional society that represents game developers all over the world. And it was a really challenging role, but also a very interesting role that allowed me to kind of connect with all of the stakeholders, from investors to publishers to developers to students and schools and governments, agencies, whatever, all over the world. And I did that for 9 years, and then stepped down. And when I stepped down, I started to do consulting work specifically around economic policy and ecosystem development, community development for the game industry. So I would work with pretty exotic, regions like, New Zealand or Iceland or Brazil, to help them figure out how to best invest in the game sector, the game ecosystem, because this was a good business to be in, right? Games were growing, billions and billions of dollars globally. These were desirable jobs, well-paid jobs, knowledge economy type workers, low ecological impact. You weren't building a big car factory. It's, a few people in a studio with a couple of computers. And one of the things that I often advised to governments was the need to have seed funding to encourage angel investors and educate angel investors, to have mentorship programs and incubators and other programs that facilitated or even sped up the creation of new startups and new intellectual property. And so I would talk about this stuff, kind of as a consultant, recommending people to do it. But as a consultant, you give advice. You never actually have to do the work. And then that kind of led me to connect with some investors in Canada who said, you know what, we think this should be done in Canada. Like, hey, it's nice that you're advising all these other places to do this stuff, but like, let's do it over here as well. And then that's what led to the start of Execution Labs, where, kind of inspired a bit by some local investors to say, hey, like, let's do it here too. But that was almost 10 years ago. And so that was really, we can talk about that in, I guess, in more detail, but that's, the super quick version of how Execution Labs came to be.
Wow. What a background, Jason. And if I'm, no, it truly is. I mean, from have never expected that like interest coming from Europe or the United States, but you're saying Brazil, Iceland, New Zealand. It's just so interesting to see that you have interest from those areas of the world.
I mean, Kunal, I mean, not to get off topic here, but I mean, even today, like through the pandemic, I mean, on any given day, I'm on Zoom with Colombia, with Indonesia, with Dubai, with Australia. I mean, literally in 1 week, I'll travel the globe like 5 times over. Of course, it's click with Zoom, but so it's not the same thing as getting on the plane. But it is absolutely global in nature. Yeah, no jet lag, but it definitely messes my daily schedule.
So, Jason, if I may ask, how big is the fund, and where have you really been deploying capital over this past year?
Yeah, so Execution Labs, was a very early stage, and in fact, for that program, we only had 7.5 million. Now we raised that late 2012, and we started deploying in 2013. And back then, there was almost no venture capital money flowing through the game industry. I mean, we really had to squeeze, every rock and turn over every stone to raise those funds. Um, whereas today, for those who don't know, I mean, almost every week there's a new VC fund dedicated to the game space of 100 million here, 400 million there. It's ridiculous how much capital is available now. So back then, 7.5 doesn't seem like much, but it was, there was zero, nobody else was doing it. And we were going very early stage. So we structured our deployment more as a kind of, YC style of accelerator with mentorship that came with it, very early stage. And we did about 25 deals over the span of a few years. And actually right now, the Execution Labs is dormant. I mean, we're in portfolio maintenance mode. So we haven't done any new investments this year. We're waiting on a few exits to kind of get, be able to redeploy some more capital.
So, Jason, what is venture fund gaming in your eyes, and how has venture funding for game studios evolved over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is the availability of venture financing has kind of come into play as business models in the game industry have changed. Historically, the game industry is sort of more like film, in the sense that it was revenue share based. It was more sort of royalty oriented investments on projects. And when you would pitch your game project to a VC, they'd say, "Oh, that looks like a film. We don't invest in content. We don't do products in that way." And really, it sort of followed this what we call in the industry the premium or paid pricing model, which is like you go to Walmart and you buy a copy of FIFA for $50. That's sort of the premium model. You go to the store, you buy a disc, you pay the fee. Or even online where you download from Xbox and you pay $60 to get the latest Call of Duty. So that premium business model or sort of pay in advance pricing model does not work well with venture. It follows more of a kind of a linear type of success curve. Whereas, let's say in the past decade, we started to see more of the free-to-play business models. Which is what you will almost always see on mobile devices, where you download the app, it's free, and then as you play, if you're really into it, well, you can pay $1 to have a boost, and pay $5 for the fancy sword, and these kind of microtransactions or in-app purchases. And what happened was that the free-to-play business model looks like a SaaS business model. And guess what? VCs are familiar with and are comfortable with SaaS. And SaaS, if done right, allows for that exponential type of success curve. And guess what? VCs like exponential success curves. And so just as the game industry more and more was adopting free to play and SaaS like models, all of a sudden venture funding started to flow in, and VCs became more and more comfortable. And now you parallel that with just the overall growth of the sector, where you have free games following a SaaS model that can generate billions of dollars just with one game. And so you have examples where VCs come in fairly early stage, and you get massively high leverage on those early investments, and you walk away with billions of dollars. So it's sort of followed in parallel with the evolution of the business or pricing models in games.
So in a sense, it's similar to the financing model used in films. It's a royalty based investment and
Well,
backed by
historically,
project based funding.
yeah, I mean, historically, it was project based. Hey, I'm gonna put money into your ninja game, and I take a 10% rev share, and I recoup my investment, etc. But I mean, venture funding today in the game industry works just like venture funding. It's they're backing the studios, for long-term growth with an eventual exit. So historically, it looked more like film financing. That still exists, but the VCs are not doing that style. They're doing normal venture funds.
So honing in on this a bit, what type of business models then do you see in the industry? And how has that evolved? Are there any up and coming ones that have recently uh, come come to life?
Yeah, well, I mean, the sort of the big one that we're, in right now is this shift from, as I was describing, kind of a pay in advance pricing model to a free to play pricing model, right? Um, going back 10 years, almost all of the revenue was, you go to the store, you buy a copy of Call of Duty, and you come home with it on a disc, and you've bought the game as a piece of content. Whereas now, you look at Fortnite and Roblox and League of Legends and Clash of Clans, and all of these games, they're all free, right? You download them, you can play them to your heart's content, as much as you want, and not pay a penny. But if you want the new update and the fancy sword and the new costume, I mean, then you start paying, for the add-ons, for the the in-game cosmetics and such, and that, just the nature of the way the games are designed, that can generate billions of dollars of revenue. So the game industry today is, I would say, more dominated by these free-to-play, more SaaS, service, game as a service type models. I mean, you have also, now what we're seeing is subscription models, right? So a bit the sort of Netflix style. For example, Xbox or Microsoft introduced a subscription model for the Xbox, where you pay X dollars a month, and they give you 100 games, or I don't even know how many they're at now, 200-300 games that you can just play, the same way you would just log into Netflix and just grab and play or watch whatever you want. And so that's also kind of upending the business a bit. The same way that Netflix kind of going around and buying up content has sort of shaken up Hollywood. It's not, I wouldn't say it's dominant yet, these subscription models. I mean, Apple has a version of that with the Apple Arcade. There's Xbox, famously. PlayStation has one as well. Amazon tried to do a subscription model, and there's a few others kind of always in play. So that's kind of shaking things up a bit. And then something that I've not played around too much with, but all the crypto, blockchain, play to earn, all that stuff is definitely something we're seeing a big interest in these days. We'll see if that really shakes up the industry or not. But yeah, I think if you really look at kind of the past decade, really the sea change has been the shift from pay for a product and bring it home from the store, versus today, which is almost, I wouldn't say all, but it's heavily favoring free to play, sort of a SaaS style, games as a service type of model.
So Jason, when honing in on the team aspect and when investing, what do you look for? Basically, what makes a good game, studio team?
Yeah, I mean, just like sort of standard venture, on the game industry side, it's all about the team, um, it's kind of very similar. You're looking for founders that have the right mindset, and that they're ambitious, but they're also humble and willing to be coached, and they're there to learn, and have the right grit and perseverance, and are good leaders and can attract talent. All the checkbox items that you would want to see in kind of any founder. This is true in the game industry as well. So you're definitely kind of on an individual basis trying to assess those traits and that mindset. Now, the other thing is also sort of the complementarity of skills. And so when we were recruiting, for new teams, we wanted to see co-founders that were a minimum of 3 and had a skill set mixture of one technical leader, one creative leader, and one business leader. And I suppose that's not unlike other, like, you want the visionary, the techie, and the hustler kind of triad. And so we were looking for that as well, right? We wanted to see that all 3 of those angles were well represented, and sort of arguments and debates on those topics were also represented at a leadership and ownership level. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the short answer, right? It's the usual, perseverance, grit, humble, ambitious, all that stuff, but then also a co-founding team that has a nice complementarity of skills. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's the short version, the short answer to that one.
So Jason, when it comes to, venture funding into these game studios, in a way, it's kind of like investing in a mutual fund or ETF, from the sense that basically you're investing in these developers who are building these games, and the games have this revenue stream for maybe a set amount of time until it tapers off, and then you're basically betting on the next few games that they build to make up the lost revenue stream on the prior games. So what are your thoughts on this, Jason?
Yeah, so that certainly works for some of the studios, where they kind of, as you say, they make a game, they ship it, they make a bunch of revenue. There's a bit of a long tail, it tapers off, and as it's tapering off, they're making and shipping the next game. That's kind of the Hollywood model, right? It's sort of product to product, and a lot of studios still work that way. What we're seeing now, the really successful ones, scale, right? It's an ongoing service. It looks more like Twitter. It looks more like Facebook, right? There's not a new version of Facebook shipped in 5 years. It's like, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's LinkedIn, whatever. But these platforms, are updated, are evolved, new features are added, things are removed, etc. New users come. So if you look at something like Fortnite, I mean, Fortnite has been running, I don't know how many years now, 4 or 5 years. And it has evolved, it's changed, new things added, new features, but it's still just Fortnite, and it's generated billions of dollars of revenue. You look at something like League of Legends. League of Legends has been running for 10 years. I mean, Counter-Strike has been running for 20 years. It's unbelievable. But League of Legends, 10 years old, is still one of the largest esport games in the world, with millions and millions and millions of players. And it generates crap tons of revenue. They had some investors in the early days. Game did super well. I think they were bought for $500 million by Tencent over in China, and they continue to service that game, which continues to generate hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, and has fans and competitions and tournaments and everything worldwide. So it's evolving. I mean, it's interesting because, yes, historically it was sort of ship a product, and then you kind of try to parallelize your revenue streams. Whereas now with game as a service, sort of SaaS models, it's I'm releasing a game that's almost more like a platform that sort of stays active over the span of many, many, many years.
So, Jason, looking at the industry from a high level, uh, over the past couple of years, $1.5 billion USD has been raised across US VC gaming funds. What does it say about the industry and how it's maturing, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean it's really exciting. I mean, as I said earlier, when we were raising for execution labs, it's like we had to squeeze every stone. Whereas now there's really a massive influx of capital. Part of it is it just makes sense if you follow the growth of the sector. I mean, we're up past 175 billion dollars. The game industry is the number one entertainment industry in the world. We're bigger than movies and music combined. um it's just from a raw dollars point of view, it's inescapable, and we continue to grow. And we're somewhat sort of pandemic, well, I don't say pandemic resilient, but even during the 2008 2009 global financial crisis, the game industry still grew. And during the pandemic we grew even more. So there's a kind of an interesting resilience that exists within the game industry. The evolution of business models, that sort of parallel digital distribution and broadband, all that sort of SaaS type models that we were discussing earlier, just makes it attractive to investors, and it functions with VC math, right? Because if you're the next Fortnite, you're going to be more than $1 billion. If you're the next League of Legends, you're going to be $1 billion. So the ability to generate, call it unicorn style studios, is unbelievable. And because it's entertainment, it can happen tomorrow, right? There's one studio, 1047. They had a game called Splitgate. They were developing it for a couple of years, and then they raised the seed round. I think it was about 10 million. And then they released the game on Xbox and PlayStation. They had millions of downloads, and like 3 months later they raised 100 million at $1 billion valuation. Because the game sort of had the traction and the numbers to show that it was pointing, that exponential curve, that hockey stick, was pointing upwards. So yeah, I mean, the VCs have become more savvy, and also what's happening is these dedicated game investors are coming from the game sector, right? They worked in corp dev, business development, or even on the operation or production side. They understand the game industry, they understand the business models, they understand what it takes to be successful, and they're making the jump to venture, and then they're convincing their LPs to put money in because of the amazing opportunities that exist. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I mean, it's just I still can't believe how much money is floating around.
In addition, I have to also add that there's been this major market shift in the sense that Axie Infinity Sky Mavis raised $150 million Series B at a $3 billion valuation. And it was particularly behind that P2E concept, play to earn, right? Which Axie Infinity was our first game that came up with that new gaming business model. And what is so interesting about that is that the traditional gaming industry has always been about the developers or the conglomerates who own these uh, big gaming studios have massive stakes, taking the profits rather than distributing those profits through the players, right? Or to the users. And I think P2E really decentralizes that, through staking rewards, etc., and gives people an opportunity to not just play a game, but to make a living playing the game and to develop, something truly unique on these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it changes the economics. Right now, you're not just playing for the fun of it, but you're also playing to earn income. Yeah, I mean, the play to earn kind of phenomena, which really has only come about this year, is fascinating. Really decentralizes the business model, and sort of shifts the economics. And yeah, we're seeing ridiculous rate. I mean, there was a soccer football game called Sorare that raised $680 million this summer, and it's like 30 guys. I think 30 guys in France working on a crypto football game. So yeah, there's is it all justifiable? Is it a bubble or not? Is this valid? I think there's still a lot of question marks around the sustainability of the pay to earn model. But certainly, as of today, there's definitely a huge appetite from the investment community, and we've seen great sort of short-term success stories like Axie Infinity, that are getting a lot of buzz. It's early days, so we'll see where that all plays out.
Agreed. Only time will tell.
Exactly.
And Jason, when people look at the gaming industry, uh, some would say gaming is passion driven, but not market responsive. What do people mean by that? What does that mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good, call it, observation slash criticism. Uh, Certainly, in the earlier days, the people making games were coming at it really from a passion perspective, from a creative perspective. These were designers and artists and programmers, that had to create, had to build worlds, had to create, immersive interactive experiences. And they really weren't thinking through the business side. They weren't thinking about, how do I market this, and who's the audience, and what's the business model. It was just, a canvas is in front of me and I must paint on the canvas and express myself. And that still happens a lot today, where so much of the talent is coming at it from the creative, passion driven, development production perspective. And amazingly, some of the work that I do today, where I'm all over the world, it's like coaching business skills and entrepreneurship to designers and artists and programmers who don't have or haven't had that kind of education or upbringing. So today it's still absolutely true that so much of the game industry is kind of driven by this passion or this love to create immersive experiences. um, and so in that sense, is one of the reasons why historically, venture hasn't really suited, because a VC would sit down with a studio head, who's like a programmer or an artist, and the story they would tell would be much more of a, called a lifestyle story, right? It's like, oh, we have this dream to make game about X, so we're making it now. It'd be great if you gave us some money so we didn't have to starve, and our goal is to like break even and make just enough money so it pays for our next game. And we're just going to go game to game, kind of in a break even type model, because their ambition is not to become billionaires. Their ambition is to create, because they're coming at it as passionate artists and designers and so on. And so when a VC sees that kind of mindset, it's like, well, listen, you might be super talented, but if all you want to do is build a lifestyle business, well, that's not compatible with VC math. So that was, almost all of the cases, going back, 10 years, but it's still very prevalent in the game industry today. That being said, you do have more and more entrepreneurs and business-oriented folks that are getting into the game industry, with a much higher degree of commercial intention. And then what they'll do is those people will then pursue the SaaS style models. They'll pursue free to play pricing models. They'll build games as platforms that can endure for 10 years, and then all of a sudden now they're talking the same language as the VCs that then are happy to back those entrepreneurial type game developers. Yeah, so that's a bit what they mean when they say, oh yeah, the game industry is kind of passion driven.
And Jason, to wrap up our call with our last question for the day, what piece of advice would you give to people out there from the journey you have had thus far in life?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, yeah, when you're at it for 25 years, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the game industry is an amazing industry to work in. And a bit sort of riffing on the last question, you have to respect the creative aspect, right? Because it is an art form. It is works of culture. It's works of expression, and there is a very serious aspect of creativity and innovation and design and art and music and writing and all that kind of stuff. It's really, it's a work of art. And so you have to respect that. You have to understand that, and you have to have people, that can do that work that requires that talent. But at the same time, the game industry is a massive, booming industry generating billions and billions of dollars of revenue. And likewise, if you don't respect and understand the business side and the economics of the game industry, you'll fail as well. So it's one of the things that I always found so fascinating is really it's this kind of, it's art, it's science, but it's also business and marketing. And you really have to kind of appreciate and respect and invest your energy in all of that, or at least have the team that has all the right skills to enable you to do so. So, if you're listening to this podcast and you're more on the entrepreneurial side and don't have those artistic skills, well, then go find those people. And on the flip side, if you're an artist and you're struggling to succeed from the business point of view, go find that partner that does understand the business side of things, and kind of find a happy marriage between the two.
And Jason, for people who are interested in potentially catching a cup of coffee with you, whether it be our listeners, game developers, gamers looking for investments, what would be the best point of contact?
Yeah, probably just looking me up either on Twitter or LinkedIn. I don't think there's any other Jason Della Rocca or people with that name out there. So I'm pretty easy to find online. So yeah, I just poke me on LinkedIn or tweet at me.
Jason, it was a pleasure having you on Geeks of the Valley, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kana.